Greetings and salutations. My name is Jose Okondo. I'm a Chattanooga-based web designer and Webflow developer. And in this video, we're talking about Schema Markup. Now, if you don't know what Schema is, it's basically a shared language that together search engines have created so that, especially on mobile, they can return what are called rich results or rich snippets to users' queries. Now, I want to reiterate, it's not just Google, but they do have some helpful documentation, which is why we're on their documentation site at the moment. And I wanted to point out a few examples so you kind of see what this stuff looks like. But here is what a blog article would look like as a rich snippet card, I think is what they call it. And it's actually a carousel in this example. Breadcrumbs are super helpful, especially for e-commerce when you want users to be able to access like category pages really easily to keep exploring and shopping. There is an FAQ one. I think we're going to be working on this later in the tutorial if things go well. And a job posting, so that would be super helpful for like recruitment sites and stuff like that. And then of course the last one I want to point out is a local business listing. And I highly recommend at least adding this if you're working on just a generic business website. So one thing I want to mention is that there's this structured data testing tool. You can input any website at all into this tool and see what kind of schema they have on their website. And as I've tried to learn schema, I've added a lot of websites into here just to see what folks are doing and realize that probably only like 5 or maybe even 10% of people actually use Schema Markup. That's a totally made up number. I have no idea what the real statistic is. But what I'm trying to communicate is that we can provide a lot of value to our clients by adding Schema Markup to their site and giving them an edge above their competitors, because it's very likely their competitors won't be using Schema. And so your clients' websites will have these rich results with extra media. They have more prominence and size. And so the click-through rates will probably be a little higher just because we're adding this to the site. And once you learn how to do it, it's actually quick to do because you're just kind of copying and pasting and plugging in particular info. The last thing I want to mention before we jump into Webflow is that I started to get, I got my start in understanding all of this by reading this particular forum post on the Webflow forum, and Saiton Systems, hope I'm saying that correctly, but he had this really thorough explanation of how to actually add schema to your website. And so this is my introduction. I'm going to go ahead and link this in the description so you can read it as well. And yeah, I just encourage you to go through it. So, all right, with that out of the way, let's actually jump into implementation. I'm here on the blog template page of my studio site. We actually just relaunched this a couple of months ago, and I want to add some schema markup to the blogs page so that I get those rich results we looked at when we were on the Google documentation earlier. Now, the first question we have to ask ourselves is, what method are we going to use to add the schema markup? Because there's actually more than one. If I go back to that Webflow forum post I looked at earlier, there's two ways. There's microdata and there's JSON. So I want to just go through really quickly those two methods, and then we'll dig into one of them at a time. Okay, so with microdata, what that looks like is by adding custom attributes to elements throughout the site. So for example, this H1 tag right here, this is the headline for the article, right? If I click D to navigate to the element settings, I can go ahead and add a custom attribute here in this little submenu. And so I'll do something like item prop for item property, headline. So essentially that's what microdata looks like, is doing that over and over and over again with elements throughout the blog, depending on the type of schema that we're trying to do. All right, so I'm going to get rid of that. The other way that we can add schema is through JSON, and JSON is added if I click P to get to the pages panel, click on the settings for this particular page, scroll down, it's added down here in the before body tag. Now I actually got some JSON in here already for the breadcrumb list, and we're going to add the blog JSON down here below. So to get started, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the search gallery. So this is what we were looking at before. And we want to add a article schema, right? So we're going to click the Get Started button. It's going to take us to the article page. And then most of these have some examples that we can look at. So I'm going to click on the C markup. It's going to open up the structured data testing tool. We're going to talk about that in a second, actually. But what's helpful about it is it's given us some scripts that we can add to our project. So you can forget about title, head, and HTML. We don't need that, but you want to copy from opening script tag to closing script tag. So I've copied that to my clipboard. I'm going to go back to my project, hit the page settings, scroll down to the bottom, and underneath what I've already got here, I'm going to add the script that we just copied. All right, so here's where it begins. Now let's go just line by line and talk about what these individual lines mean. Let's actually take the first two lines, and what this is doing is it's referencing a specific schema type. So if I go to the news article page on schema.org, it's actually referencing this particular website, this page, and saying, all right, I'm going to add some schema markup that's telling the browser, and the definition for what I'm adding is this website on schema.org. So this is where you would add the type of schema that you're adding. If I go up to the breadcrumb list I have up above, you'll notice the type is breadcrumb list. All right, so scroll back down. I lost my spot. Okay, here we go. The next is the main entity of page, and basically what it wants to know is the URL for the blog. So let's go ahead and save that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go open up this, copy the URL. I can go ahead and close it again. And under blogs template, let's open that up, scroll down, find the URL, and we can just paste it right here. Now it's got the google.com/article as a placeholder, so I'm just deleting that. And then we want to make a change, because remember, this is a template page. So whatever I do in this in these settings is going to be applied to every single blog that's published. But here I'm referencing one specific blog. I don't want to do that. I want to link this info to the CMS so that every blog page is referencing its own URL, right? So I can leave the root domain, and then I can leave this page by itself, but I want to change the slug. So instead of having how to evaluate a logo design, let's get rid of that. And I'm going to click on add field and hit slug. And this is where the beauty of the CMS is. Now, each page is going to have the correct URL. All right, so we're just going to go line by line and do the same thing. So instead of article headline, we're going to delete that, and we can just add name. That is the article title. All right, here we get to a little bit of a bump in the road, and this is asking us for a matrix of images. I don't have that set up in my project, so if I just hit enter, I want to talk about kind of like the format for how this works. So most of the JSON looks like this. It's two quotes with a property in it. So here the property is image, followed by, a colon with two more quotes, and inside of the second set of quotes is a value. So for example, the value here is the article name. And then if there's a line that's following it, there's a comma. That comma is really important because it's communicating to the browser that there's another line following the current one. So if I didn't have that comma there and I had this down here, I would actually get an error and my JSON wouldn't work. So those commas are really important. Notice that there's two commas here, but the last one does not have one. That's communicating that there's three, there's not four. All right, so what we can do is, since we don't have a matrix of images, we want to delete the matrix. So we've got to start from that opening bracket to the closing bracket, delete that, add our quotes, and inside of the quotes, we're going to click on the add, oops, I think I lost my spot. There we go. Click the add field, and we want to do the featured image. So there it is, feature image. And then remember, since there's a line following it, we need to add a comma. All right, so I know that was a little bit more complicated, but the rest are pretty easy. So here, instead of that placeholder, let's add a date published, and I think that is published on. There we go. We can do the same thing with date modified, add field, updated on, author. Okay, so when you want to leave the type as person, but you want to add the name. Like I could go ahead and add Jose Ocondo. That's me. But there's multiple people in our studio, well, just two, who write articles. So I want to add the author name from the CMS. Now, publisher is going to be organization. We can leave that alone. But we do want to change the name of the organization from Google to Serve. That's the name of my studio. And then we get this logo down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Save, open up my Assets folder, and then right here I've got my logo ready to go. So I'm going to click on there and click on this little icon that means Expand in New Tab. Then I'm going to copy this, Webflow, go to Project Settings, scroll down, and here in the URL, we can get rid of Google's placeholder URL and add ours. Perfect. So now our logo is going to be associated with each blog. And then finally, for the description, we can get rid of their placeholder and we can add the post summary. All right, I'm going to hit save, publish. And now we're going to test just to make sure that the schema that we added actually worked. So I'm going to open up in a new tab again. And then here's where we get to use the structured data testing tool. So I'm going to go to the, we can actually close this one. That was what we were looking at previously. And then in the data testing tool, you can just add any URL, copy it directly from the browser bar, then click Run Test. On the left-hand side, you're going to see the code for the website. And I think if I scroll down, here is the schema. So this is the schema for the breadcrumb list, and here is the schema for the news articles. It's detected two types of schema for this web page. So we're not going to look at the breadcrumb list now, but if I click on news article, it's going to show us all the stuff that we added. So the type is correct. It's a news article. It's got the headline, the image, the featured image for the project, date published and modified, all the stuff that we added, it's in there. The wonderful thing about the schema is that it'll tell you if you've got an error or a warning. So if you fail to add something that Google would like to see, it'll tell you if something has the wrong type or isn't correctly added in, it'll tell you. So this is a super helpful tool. And like I said, you can actually add anything. So one helpful thing I like to do is, like, for example, Google, I just assumed, hey, they write blogs. Surely they add schema to their blogs and they do it correctly. So what you could do is you could click New Test, enter in the blog URL for Google, and then it's going to tell you, oh, okay, this is what they added to their blogs. You see that they've got a warning because they don't have the date modified, and probably that's because that's their newest blog. It probably has not been modified, but it's just a warning. It's not an error. If you have an error, you need to fix that so that you actually have rich results showing up. But if you have a warning, you can ignore those as long as you have a rationale for why that warning exists. But anyways, you can look at this, and you can even look at the schema markup they have on their site. So here's the schema right here that they're using for this blog article. So if you ever want to know, like if you're looking at a competitor, like, man, they're just their organic search rankings are really high. I wonder if they're doing anything with schema that I could implement in my own project, where you could kind of sneakily test their site and see if they're doing something you can implement in your own project. All right, so anyways, that does it for the JSON. Let's jump to the next section. If you watched my last tutorial, this screen will be familiar to you. This is the frequently asked questions list that we built. And what we're going to do is we're going to add schema markup to it now so that hopefully we get a rich result that looks a little bit like this. So going back here, just a couple of things. First is that we're going to be using microdata as opposed to JSON to add markup to this. And the reason is that this list is controlled by a CMS collection. So the user is going to, the client is going to be able to add, delete, or modify the FAQ list. And we can't really add a CMS collection inside of the FAQ page here. There's not a way to do that. Now, if the FAQ list, if it was static, like if it was not going to change, then yes, I would be able to add it as JSON in here. But the fact that it's controlled by the collection means that I need to go ahead and add microdata as opposed to JSON. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Explore Search Gallery, and just like we did with the article, we're going to click on Get Started. And down here under Examples, they've already got an example of the markup for microdata. So I'm going to click See Markup. Now, this looks really intimidating because this is, code. This is actual HTML paired with the JSON. But we're just going to take it line by line, and that'll make it a little bit easier. The first thing that we're going to look at is the HTML tag. Now, the HTML tag is kind of like the first tag of any website page. So for example, even this rich results page, if I go to inspect, if I go all the way to the top, then HTML is the very first tag. It's what holds everything. So what this is trying to communicate is it's telling the browser, hey, this page, it's an FAQ page. So we can just, what we're going to do is we're going to take our cue from this example, and we're going to add everything that we see that's JSON in this example, we're going to add to our own website. The first thing we need to add is an item scope. So I went ahead and copied that. And here in the navigator, we don't have access to the HTML tag, but we do have access to the body and main tag. And honestly, main tag is probably fine. So we're going to click plus here and add that item scope. Now, item scope, the way I understand it is that the item scope tells the browser, hey, I'm starting a new category of schema. It's like a new umbrella, and the content underneath that's nested inside of this element is all referencing this item type. So it's kind of like saying, beware browser, I'm starting a new item type. So if I go back to, actually, let me move this over to the right so we have easier access to it. Now we've got to add the item type. So I'm going to copy what's in between the quotes, go back to my project and click, or type in item type, paste in the value that we copied and save. All right. Now the next thing that they have JSON attached to is this div block. And basically from here to here is the individual FAQ item. So here is the question, what is the return policy? And here is the text, most unopened items, and so on and so forth. So we don't want to start with this line right here. And one thing about working with microdata is it's really persnickety about the hierarchy of things. So you got to make sure that, like for example, this text is inside of a div block right here, and they've got another div block right here that has some JSON attached to it. That is key with microdata. You have to add it in the correct level or correct hierarchy. So you're going to see what we mean as we go through. So with the div block, remember this is the wrapper that's encasing the whole FAQ item. We need to add an item scope, an item property, and an item type. So let's go ahead and do that now. The wrapper is this right here. So if you look at our navigator, I'm not in the list. I'm in the wrapper that's encasing the actual FAQ item. In my element settings, let's add the item scope. Then there's going to be an item prop or property. If I go back to the example, I can just copy this right here, add it in the value and save. And then finally, there's an item type. If I go back to the example, I can copy that directly from here. Actually, that little button was in the way. All right, so now we've got that entered into our project. The next thing that they have some JSON attached to is this right here, the item prop equals name, and then the actual question being asked. So we're going to go into the project, click on the text block that has the question, and add that here, item prop equals name. Now the reason there's no item type or item scope here is because with the wrapper, we've already declared an item scope and an item type, and this item property name, it's an expected value of this item type. So I know that was a little bit difficult to understand, but as you as you do this on your own and you test these things in the structured data testing tool, you'll see it'll tell you, hey, that's not an expected value, or so on and so forth. So you'll get the hang of it once you just put it into practice. All right, let's go back to the example. The next thing is this div right here. It's got an item scope, an item prop, and an item type. And inside of that is another div that's got the actual text of the response. Remember, hierarchy is really important in microdata. So we can't add this JSON to this particular text. We got to add it to the pane, the parent element. So I'm going to click on item or add an attribute here. Let's add item scope. Go back to the rich results, and we'll add an item prop of accepted answer. And then an item type. Go back to the example and copy this right here. Remember, I started out knowing nothing about this. All I did was follow the examples, and you kind of learn from there. All right, so we added the scope, the prop, and the type. The next thing we need to do is this div block has got the actual response, and it just has one thing, item prop equals text. So we're going to click on the actual paragraph that's nested inside of the pane and include item prop is text. And believe it or not, that is actually it. We're done. I'm going to click publish, and we want to go ahead and test it just to make sure that we're not getting any errors. I'm going to open that in a new tab, copy the URL, go to the structured data testing tool, enter it into the field, and run test. Over here on the left hand side, you're going to see here's like the microdata that the testing tool is picking up. And over here on the right, you'll see that it's picking up, hey, this page has a type of FAQ page. And then it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 actual types of FAQ items. That's perfect because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 questions in our FAQ list. Not only that, but we're getting, if I go back to the testing tool, we're getting 0 errors and 0 warnings. And so hopefully when somebody searches and a result is that page, they will see something like this. All right, so that is kind of the end of the implementation part of this video. Now, some of you may be a little bit disappointed because I didn't cover a specific schema type that you were wanting to use or learn about, but my goal was not necessarily to go through each schema type, but just to teach you the process that I go through when I want to add something to my project. So I just want to reiterate one more time kind of the resources that you have to learn about schema. So the first, of course, is schema.org. I'm here on the local business page type, and when you first land on one of these, it can be a little bit intimidating because you've got this huge chart of things. These are all item properties. In other words, in the microdata, item prop equals something. That's what these are. And like I said, it can be intimidating because there's so many. But if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there are typically a few examples of how to implement this in your project. So here it is without markup. Here it is with the microdata example, and you can just see, oh, okay, I need to add an item prop here, an item scope, and an item type. So you can just copy and paste that into your own project. And they even got the JSON as well, so you can add that to your page settings. Then I want to remind you of the search gallery. We've already looked at it a couple of times, but I encourage you to go through it in detail, read about all of the different types, and see if there's a project you're currently working on that you can add one of these things to. And then finally, there's the structured data testing tool. We've already used it a couple of times in this tutorial, but I encourage you, use it whenever you add JSON or microdata to your project, just to make sure that you've done it correctly. But also, add any website to this and just test it out and see what other people are doing. That way you kind of learn how others have added schema to their own websites. If you enjoyed this video, I encourage you, please subscribe and click the notification bell so that you get notified of future videos. I mentioned in the previous tutorial I'm working on this like huge video. I think it's going to be like more than 2 hours, possibly 3. I might even break it up into more than one video, but it's a big page build out. And then finally, I want to mention, if you work for an agency, then please reach out. I love working with agencies and being their Webflow developer, being in their contractor network. So I'm available for projects. So if that's you, then please reach out and let me know. I'd love to work with you. All right. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next video.